To reinforce concrete walls, rebar is usually added inside of those walls. The area reinforcement command allows for entire areas to have that reinforcement added at once. In this example, we'll add that reinforcement to part of a foundation wall. To do this, we'll go to the west elevation and reinforce that portion of the wall. So, underneath the project browser, we're going to move down and we're going to find our west elevation and just double click on that. Next, we'll go ahead and zoom in on that area. And let's just reinforce this middle portion of the foundation wall. Now, realistically, the entire wall is probably going to get this reinforcement, but this is just a little bit of the overall process. So we'll go ahead and zoom in here, and we're going to place that reinforcement between these two columns right here. So to begin with, we'll move up to structure, and we're going to look for area reinforcement. So select on the word area. Next, it's going to ask us for the floor or wall to add this area reinforcement to. In this case, it's going to be a wall, so move up to the very top of this wall and select on the top of the wall. Now, I will say that if you move your mouse down toward the middle of the wall, you'll notice it isn't highlighting, and you can try to click there all day, it won't select the wall. It's always easier to select something in Revit by coming up to one of the edges of it in order to be able to make that selection. So go ahead and select on the wall. Everything sort of grays itself out, but it just means that the structural reinforcement command is now in effect. So we can see over here it says structural area reinforcement. And if we look at the properties over here, we can see that it's going to be doing what's called a maximum spacing of however many feet that we specify. In this case, it's going to be every foot. We're going to have a new piece of rebar put inside of our wall. The size of that rebar currently is going to be a number 4. If we decided to change that, we could just pick a different size rebar off of the list. We can also say whether or not there's going to be some sort of hook at the end of the rebar so that it'll curve up, or however way that we want that to be structurally put together. And all this is already contained inside of the properties of this structural reinforcement. If you want to change any of it, you can just come in here and change the properties of it, and that's how it'll show when we place it into the wall. So now we need to actually draw where in this wall this structural reinforcement is going to show up. So in order to be able to do this, usually I just start using my drawing tools and draw it in this location. And we are going to do that, but before that, I'd like to add an offset up here of perhaps 3 inches, just so that we keep this rebar away from the very top or the very bottom or the very edges of our wall, so that it has enough area to be able to be completely covered by the concrete. So once we type in 3 inches here, we're going to move up here, and this time we're going to use a different tool. We're going to use the rectangle tool because it's really the fastest tool for doing this. So you select on the little rectangular shape up here, move down, and then pick on the intersection of the top of the wall and the top of this pier or column. Now move over in this direction. One of the things you'll notice is when we selected this and we're moving in this direction, we're getting this colored line. Unfortunately, though, it's currently on the outside of the wall, which isn't where we want it to be. We want it to be offset 3 inches to the inside. So in order to be able to do that, all you have to do is click on the space bar, like you're going to put a space between words. Now you can see how it's flipped to the inside. And now pick this other corner down here in the lower right. Now where it's going to place this rebar is going to be in between each of these lines. Last thing before I click the big green check mark up here is that we could have made this be any shape with curves or arcs or circles, as long as it was one continuous line going around. Now just come up here to the big green check mark. It's going to automatically give it a note saying that these are number 4 rebar spaced at 1 foot. And if we decide to take a look at it in a section view, we can come up here and just double click on the little section head here. We can now zoom in and we can see how every 1 foot there's a piece of rebar going in this direction, a piece of rebar going in this direction, and there's rebar coming up here as well as rebar coming down here. So it put the entire thing of rebar spaced exactly the way it showed in the properties inside of our wall. So area of reinforcement allows you to model all your structural reinforcement in an area simultaneously without the need to draw each bar individually.